a moment, but not by much. Let me know when you need it again. All right, so you all can go ahead and sit up regular now. We don't have to duck down until we're on the way out of the cave, so we've got about 25 minutes. Can everybody hear me pretty good? Awesome, so welcome to Lost River Cave. Right over here is a formation called a flow stone, cleverly called water flows over stone. Yep. So this white stuff in the ceiling, that is the calcite that helps to make our blue holes blue. So over time, the water travels through the rock, picks up the calcite, and redeposits it on the flow stone in the form of travertine. Now this green coloration is algae being kept alive by the artificial light. Peanut butter color is the healthy rock. That is what it is supposed to look like. And the darker color is an old pollution scar. So above this area runs part of Nashville Road. Before we installed our pollution filter, we had a lot of runoff coming from the surface and landing on this rock. But you can see some of the healthy color coming in. It is slowly healing itself. Just give it a few hundred years to do so. So if you come back then, we'll be waiting for you. So we're entering into the largest part of our cave system right now on the tour. This is called our breakdown room. We're going to see a lot of rock in the water, along the walls. It used to be on the ceiling hundreds of years ago, but it broke down in a big event called a breakdown. Yeah, a lot of creative terminology around here. Now, somebody had the really stellar idea to build the city of Bowling Green on top of the cave system. So you might have heard about the Corvette Museum a few years ago, anybody? Awesome. So that sinkhole that happened is not part of our cave. It is just part of the topography around here. We don't claim that one. It is not ours. But you got to be really careful when building around caves. So about a mile into our cave system from that entrance, there's a huge wall of breakdown separating this part of the cave from the other passageways beyond. Now we do have about 7 miles to our cave. That has been completely explored and mapped. They have not found a way to connect us to Mammoth Cave. We are our own cave system. We also have 3 other openings into the cave throughout the city of Bowling Green. They're not as big as that entrance we just came in though. They may be big enough for 1 to 3 people to pass in at a time. So does anybody have any questions so far about anything? All right, we may be tapping on this wall here in a moment just to keep your hands and arms inside the boat just in case. If we hit any rocks today, it'll make a little bit of a booming noise. We call it cave thunder. So has anyone felt a really cold drop of water yet? A few of you? All right, the cold drops are called cave kisses. They're coming from the stalactites on the ceiling. If you get a warm drop of water, that is called a bat kiss. So if you get a warm drop, please let me know. I will try to find the culprit. We normally do not see bats in our cave, especially this time of year. In all the 6 years I've worked here, I have seen no more than 10 bats in this cave at the same time. They hear most between November and February when it's a lot colder outside. So the reason we don't see a lot of bats is we are considered as a wet cave by geologists, meaning we are prone to flooding. So during the day, our bats are sleeping out in the valley under leaves and tree bark. By night, they are more active, getting about 1,000 mosquitoes in one evening. Now we do have 3 species of bat around here. We have the big brown bat that is about the size of a tennis ball. We also have a tricolor bat and a little brown bat that resemble fuzzy brown chicken nuggets. So our bats are pretty teeny tiny. And as you look at the ceiling, you'll notice our stalactites are pretty small too. This one is the biggest stalactite in the cave, ladies and gentlemen. Pretty impressive, isn't it? We call it the fraying hands. It's about 1.5 feet in length and a couple thousand years old. Now the reason our stalactites are so small is flooding. When the Nashville flood comes through every few hundred years, the water can reach the ceiling in this cavern, and that brings in debris like tree limbs that breaks off those stalactites and they have to restart growing. Now normally when you see a stalactite in the ceiling, you see a stalagmite beneath it. Those form from the cave floor and they might reach the ceiling. But since this lower passageway is covered with water all the time, stalagmites cannot grow that well down here, but we do have them in the upper areas where it tends to be a lot drier. Now, I mentioned how they built Bowling Green on top of the cave system, so you got to be really careful building, as I also mentioned. So we're coming up on another flowstone here. But as you look at it, you're wondering, where's the water? Sitting here on the boat, we are about 85 feet below the surface of Nashville Road. That road used to be 2 lanes. When they expanded it to 5 lanes, it cut off the surface here. This flowstone is no longer considered active unless we get a heavy rain. Then it flows more freely on the side. You can see it's growing a little bit right there. On the bottom, we'll see those lines in the rock. That is what we call cave drapery or cave bacon. All those little squiggly lines. Now, you're probably hearing the sound of rushing water up in the dark tunnel. You all signed your waivers, right? Awesome. Ready for Class 3 Whitewater? Yay, I love your enthusiasm. Good thing you're not that excited about it. We don't have any whitewater tours. Darn. What you're hearing is water going through our 5-foot tall man-made dam back here. So without the dam installed, we could offer a walking tour, but not a boat tour. So we're gonna go back to our dam and turn around, and we're gonna see the beginning of a little bit over 6.5 more miles of passage beyond. I am gonna stop talking back here because talking over water is kind of hard to do. We're going to be going beneath another low ceiling. We do not have to duck. I only ask of you, please do not touch the ceiling back here. We have stalactites growing close, and if we touch those, the oils in our hands will stop their growth. So does anyone have any questions before we head back? All right, just sit back, relax, and enjoy the ride, everybody. Here we go. one another. And then we see these two small gray bumps. These are what we call horn coral fossils. These were sea creatures that went extinct before dinosaurs did. So many hundreds of thousands of years ago, Kentucky was covered by a shallow tropical sea. So this rock around us is ancient tropical seabed. Being a born and raised Kentuckian, to me that is one of the neatest facts about the bluegrass state. We were covered by an ocean at one point. Alright, I'm going to stop talking while we pass the other boat, but you're more than welcome to touch the water if you'd like. We're not close to hitting any rocks through here. Touch was pretty cold, right? Okay, now let's talk about what lives in it now that you've touched it. You're welcome. So we have a few different types of aquatic animals we see inside our cave. On this side of the dam, we see the same crawdads that are seen out in the valley. They still have a light brown color pigment to their skin. So if you look behind you, you can get an idea of how dark the cave can be without lights, right? Completely and totally dark on this side. So those crawdads have not adapted to the cave's darkness yet. Now beyond the dam, where it stays dark all the time and the water gets about 8 feet deep at its deepest, we have the pigmentless and eyeless southern cave fish and cave crayfish. So you don't need pigment or eyes when it's completely dark, right? So when those fish swim, they can sense the vibrations water makes as it travels around objects. It is very similar to how bats use echolocation when they fly around at night. Now the southern cave fish can live on average up to about 70 years long. And they can go almost half a year without eating a single drop of food. And by drop, I mean literally. Those fish eat guano, also known as bat poop. But we don't have a high bat population, as I mentioned previous, so those fish have adapted to go a long time without eating. Now sometimes they can eat the cave crickets. The crickets can walk on the water. They have very fine hairs on their legs that allows them to do so. We also see cave spiders, cave beetles, millipedes, and centipedes. Those creepy crawlies live in the upper passageways of our cave system where it's a lot drier. We do also see the occasional salamander, but we don't see any large mammals in here because if you look around, not a lot of food to offer for them. Now it was animals that brought our first people to the cave between 8,000 and 11,000 years ago. So that was the era of Paleo Native Americans. They were migratory, following herds of mammals like woolly mammoth, to give you an example, that are now extinct. So they had to have very large hunting implements. Out of this rock, they fashioned what we call Clovis points. If you're not familiar, the points look like your hand when you hold it up like this. Now, if you look at this direction, can you all see this triangular opening with a metal pole in the middle? Right up there. That is an entrance to a room that sits about 15 feet below the surface of our cave. Here's a light if needed. That room used to be open to the outside of the cave by a flowstone that has collapsed over time due to natural causes. So up there, we have not only found evidence of the Paleo Native American campsite, but we've also found evidence of an archaic Native American trading post. So the archaic period of Native American history happened a few thousand years after the Paleo era. So in the archaic time period, we see villages pop up, communities being developed, domestication of plants and animals. We see a lot of those little arrowheads that we're more familiar with. We see the replicas in gift shops. We have found some of those on our property. We even found bits of animal bone and mussel shell pieces in the cave. Now the mussel shells are pretty unique to this particular area because we don't see them in our riverbed. Those mussels most likely came from either the Barren or the Green River systems. Now we had mostly Cherokee Native American tribes in this region. There were several others, but Cherokee were most noted in Kentucky specifically. Unfortunately, and kind of surprising too, we have not found any painting or writing from the Native Americans, but even deeper off this ledge up here, we have found a passageway called the Civil War Smoke Writing Room. So some of the Confederate and Union soldiers who decided to explore in our cave had torches. They would hold the flame to the rock and smoke in their names and initials up on the ceiling. So if you've never seen smoke writing before, it looks kind of like the faded black paint you might have seen on the Jesse James wall by the jail doors getting our life preservers. Now, as far as Jesse James is concerned, as I mentioned, we haven't found any evidence saying he was in our cave. But on this ledge is where Mr. Perkins set up his Jesse James wax figure tour, right up along there. To give you an idea of the height between the floor and the ceiling up there, it's maybe about, I'd probably say no more than 6 feet tall at its tallest. I'm about 5'7" and a half. I can stoop up there by walking with my head and shoulders down. Actually, it's probably more like 5'5" really. But it's not a very tall passageway, but you can imagine people during the nightclub days going up there in their nice evening gowns and their nice tuxes and seeing a made-up Jesse James tour and hearing a story that was made up too. Now for 5 extra cents, you could drink the flowstone water there. That was called Jesse James's Lucky Spring. They claimed he was lucky to have a never caught in Kentucky. What's not so lucky though was back then that water ran right below a cow pasture. So they were paying a nickel to drink pasteurized water. A lot of extra nutrients. Now the reason that Mr. Perkins and other cave owners had these Jesse James tours was because of the cave wars. That was a part of Kentucky's history from 1920 through 1950. So in those 30 years, cave owners would compete to see whose cave was the most popular and to see who could make the most money. Having a tour surrounding Jesse James, great way of bringing in revenue. Well, that's fine to see the cave, but there was not any cave etiquette in those 30 years. So people were going in for the tours and taking home rocks, minerals, artifacts, left behind their graffiti and trash. So the cave wars had a very negative impact on the cave ecologies and archaeological records. That is why it is now illegal to take any type of rock like travertine back at our flowstone out of Kentucky caves. Most of the rock you saw in our gift shop, it's real, but we import it from Brazil. Yeah, no Kentucky rock, but it's for a good legitimate reason. Does anybody have any questions? All right, was this anybody's first time in a cave? One? Okay. So, where you were standing out in the valley at the start of this tour at the Blue Hole, you all were already 1 mile into this cave system. So you might have noticed some really large boulders on the right side of the paved pathway walking down out there in the valley, right? Those are the inside walls of this cave many hundreds of thousands of years ago. Just over time, the river dissolved away the limestone walls of the interior. The walls got too wide and could not support the ceiling, so it collapsed, forming the valley you just walked through. Now yes, that will eventually happen to this cave, but not for a million or so years. We're geologically sound for a good long while. Alright, so if everybody wants to look forward, we're going to start to line our boat up. We're going to shine this big old light that way. We don't want to blind anybody. Here comes the light. Alright, so that low rock is slowly making its way toward us. I know it might look a little bit lower from this side, but it is the same one we came in under. We also call it the rock of many names, because if you hit your head, you might want to call it a name or two, and many contain 4 letters. Like ouch, or John. Alright, I want to lean on back to the middle for us. We're going to take it a little bit slow at first to let you get your bearings. Duck your heads, everybody. Alright, please maintain those positions. Now we do pride ourselves on customer service. If you did not like my talking or Caleb's driving, stand up now and tell us. Alright, thank you all so much. We appreciate that. Coming into the dock, we're going to ask you to stay seated. We will unload you in an orderly fashion. Once you put your personal flotation devices back where you found them, feel free to cross the bridge and check out the dance floor.
I'll let you unload him. He's going from loader to dock.
Alright,